Hello and welcome to my channel. You've seen people dual-wielding swords. You've seen people dual-wielding guns. Now get ready for a waifu who dual-wields with a sword and a gun. Careful guys, she's a main character. Irene is a guard from the dual-strike archetype and her normal attacks hit enemies twice. Operators from this archetype usually have offensive recovery skills. Do note that while Irene will be hitting enemies twice, she'll only gain 1 SP from it. Moving on to her stats, it is decent, when compared to guard Chen, another operator from the same archetype and rarity. Irene beats her in both HP and attack, but loses out on defense. Irene's trust bonuses focus more on offense as well, unlike Chen's who is more spread out. Before going on to her talents, I would like to introduce a new mechanic Irene offers: Levitate. When this effect is applied to enemies, they are lifted off the ground and is now considered to be an aerial unit. They are also unable to move, attack, or use their skills, essentially stunning the enemy. The duration of the effect will be halved against enemies with weight 3 and above. This mechanic is extremely unique and quite rare among the operators, and there are pros and cons to this effect. First up is the pro. Levitated enemies aren't considered to be occupying the tile it is on. This means Trapmaster specialists can now deploy their traps on the same tile the enemy is levitating on. As for the con, most melee operators can no longer target levitated enemies, causing a drop in overall DPS. Now, let's take a look at her talents. Irene will have a 50% chance to ignore 50% of the enemy's defense. When attacking aerial units, the 50% chance increases to 100%, thanks to Irene's levitate ability that temporarily makes enemies an aerial unit. She'll be able to apply this effect fairly often. The amount of defense ignored is absurdly high for a talent and is amazing against enemies with high defense, a great first talent. Irene's second talent gives her an attack speed buff. If there are seaborne enemies in the stage, the buff is doubled. Attack speed increase is always a welcome addition for dual-strike guards as they are able to charge their skills much faster. While seaborne enemies are quite rare, they do appear from time to time in future events. The attack speed buff is great and can potentially shorten the downtime of Irene's third skill by 5 whole seconds, another great talent. Moving on to Irene's skills, she will change her next attack to dealing critical damage, inflicting the enemy with 1 second of levitate, after which, Irene will launch another critical attack again. As this skill is a power strike skill, it has a low SP cost of only 3 at Mastery 3. While the damage from this skill is great, it doesn't offer anything unique, a good skill to bring into AFK strategies, though her other skills are preferred for general content. Now, if you think this video is helpful, do give my channel a sub to stay tuned for more guides. Irene's second skill does a burst of physical damage to up to 6 ground enemies in range, levitating enemies with weight 3 or less for a short duration. This skill is similar to Bybeak's second skill, which offers crowd control and decent burst damage. But there is a slight flaw in the design. Irene won't be able to attack levitating enemies with her normal attacks. This means she won't be able to charge her skill while the enemies are levitating. The skill also only hits ground enemies, so spamming it is just a waste. The levitate effect is also only limited to enemies with weight 3 or below, which rules out most elite and boss enemies in the game. Overall, while the burst damage is good, this skill is too gimmicky for my liking, and when compared to her third skill, it just isn't the best skill to use on her. Moving on to Irene's signature skill, she will deal a burst of physical damage to all enemies in a diamond-shaped range and inflicts levitate on them. She will then fire 12 times at random enemies in range, with each hit dealing high physical damage. This skill also benefits massively from any attack buffs, such as Warfarin's skill 2. Players like to compare Irene to Chen due to the similarities between the two skills, but that'll take a whole dedicated video to explain everything, so I'll leave out some of the less important bits. In general, yes, Irene beats Chen in terms of burst DPS in most scenarios, unless they are attacking enemies with low defense. Does that mean Irene can replace Chen? Unfortunately, the answer is also a yes. Of course, there are some things that Chen does better. Some examples include launching her attacks faster, which in turn allows her to start recharging her skill earlier than Irene, gaining immunity to damage while her skill is active, and the ability to regenerate SP passively through her talent. But when looking at the bigger picture, Irene just offers more damage and general usefulness than Chen. Lastly, we have her module. Putting it simply, it's extremely disappointing. At the first stage, Irene's attacks will ignore 70 defense. Compared to her talent that shaves off 50% of the enemy's defense, it's almost laughable. Even without her talent, a 70 defense reduction is really small. As for the later stages, Irene will get an attack buff increase in her talent. It is definitely better than the defense debuff, but the values are still extremely low. While the damage increase in Irene's burst damage is there, it just isn't worth the materials you're investing into the module. I'd recommend waiting for her second module to be released before going all in on this one. So, should you pull and build Irene? I'd say probably yes. High raw burst damage, crowd control through levitation. Irene is definitely a strong operator to pull for. While Irene excels in what she does, the role of a burst damage dealer is highly saturated with operators fulfilling the same niche, with the prime example being the Ice Cream Queen. If you're looking for a heli droppable operator that deals high burst damage, Irene is a good option to go for. Otherwise, you can choose to skip her. So, will you be pulling for this waifu with a big forehead? Tell me in the comments below, and that's all from me. Bye.